Lonely in America. Imagine standing in the middle of an American city. Everything is wide, clean, fast, and strangely quiet. You have a job. You have a place to live. You have strong Wi-Fi. But every night, when the door closes, one question stays with you. Why do I feel so alone inside? This video is not just a sad story. It is my real journey during the last 2 weeks in the United States, a journey through different climate, culture, language, and emotions. If you have ever tried to learn English and felt tired, stuck, or ready to give up, maybe I am speaking your hidden thoughts. I want to start very slowly, because this is a video for slow English listening, reading, and speaking practice. But before English, I want to talk about a feeling. Loneliness in America is not loud. It does not look like movies. No one tells you that you don't belong here. No one pushes you away. People are polite. Very polite. And that is the dangerous part. When there is no clear conflict, your mind turns inward and asks, is the problem me? During these 2 weeks in the US, I learned an uncomfortable truth. You can understand basic English, follow rules, know the culture on the surface, and still feel deeply lonely. Psychology calls this internal loneliness. Studies show that people are not lonely because they lack people, but because they lack meaningful connection. And language is one of the strongest bridges to that connection. Here is the paradox. When you feel lonely, you are more afraid to speak English. You are afraid of mistakes. Afraid of judgment. Afraid of sounding stupid. So you speak less. And when you speak less, you feel even more lonely. A very quiet loop. A silent loop. I remember the first day of those 2 weeks. The weather in America changed so fast that my body reacted before my mind. Cold in the morning. Hot at noon. Wind at night. Back home, I was used to stable weather. Stable feelings. Here, the climate itself felt like a test. Neuroscience tells us that the human brain hates sudden change. When the brain cannot predict the environment, it goes into protection mode. You become quieter. You stay inside yourself. And you speak less. I walked outside and heard people talking so fast. So fast. Real English is not like textbooks. It does not wait for you. It does not pronounce every word clearly. It swallows sounds. It connects words. It rushes past your ears like cold wind. And you stand there, smiling, nodding, saying yeah again and again. While one sentence repeats in your head, I don't really understand. One evening, I sat in my car, parked in front of my house, not ready to go inside. Not because I was being dramatic, but because I realized something painful. I had not spoken one full English sentence all day. I listened. I read signs. I thought in English. But I did not speak. And when you don't speak, you start doubting yourself. Maybe my English is worse than I thought. Psychology calls this imposter syndrome. You feel like you don't deserve to be here. You don't deserve to speak. You don't deserve to make mistakes. And here is the important part. This feeling is very common for language learners in a new country. Not because you are weak, but because your brain is trying to protect you from social embarrassment. Basically, your brain is saying, silence is safer. But silence, when it lasts too long, becomes loneliness. That was the moment I understood something important. If I wait until my English is good enough before I speak, I may never speak at all. English is not a door that opens only when you are perfect. It is a road. And the only way to learn how to walk on it is to walk slowly. So I changed one small thing. I didn't learn more vocabulary. I didn't watch more videos. I gave myself permission to speak slower than normal. I used very simple English. Very simple sentences. I stopped trying to sound smart. I just tried to sound honest. And something strange happened. The loneliness inside me became a little quieter. This part of the story has no big drama. No miracle. Just a simple realization. Feeling lonely in America does not mean you failed. It means you are at the beginning of a new journey, a journey of learning English and learning how to stay with yourself at the same time. And if you are watching this video, maybe you are at that stage too. That's okay. You are not slow. You are not bad at English. You are just learning, at your own pace. 2 weeks changed me. Have you ever noticed how 2 weeks can feel like nothing, and everything at the same time? 14 days. On paper, it's short. But when those days happen in a foreign country, with a foreign language, a foreign rhythm of life, your brain experiences them differently. In the last 2 weeks in the United States, I didn't suddenly become fluent in English. I didn't transform into a confident speaker overnight. What changed was something quieter, the way I looked at myself when I tried to speak. At the beginning of those 2 weeks, my days followed a very predictable pattern. I woke up early, checked the weather, checked my phone, checked my mind for motivation. Most mornings, motivation was missing. Not because I was lazy, but because my brain felt tired before the day even started. Psychology explains this as decision fatigue. When everything around you is unfamiliar. Signs, accents, systems, rules, your brain uses extra energy just to function. By the time you think about speaking English, your mental battery is already low. I remember standing in line at a coffee shop. A simple situation. Just order a drink. But inside my head, a small storm started. What if I don't understand the question? What if I answer wrong? What if the line behind me gets impatient? My heart beat a little faster. My shoulders tightened. This wasn't about coffee. This was about identity. In that moment, English was not a language. It was a test of whether I belonged. Neuroscience tells us that when the brain senses social threat, even a small one, it activates the same system used for physical danger. Your body prepares to protect you. Muscles tense. Breathing changes. Words disappear. That's why sometimes, even if you know the English sentence at home, it vanishes in real life. Your brain isn't stupid. It's scared. During the first few days, I avoided unnecessary conversations. I used self-checkout machines. I nodded instead of asking questions. I chose silence because silence felt efficient. But silence has a cost. Every time I chose not to speak, my brain learned a lesson. Avoiding English keeps us safe. And the brain loves repeating what feels safe. By the end of the first week, something interesting happened. The loneliness didn't feel sharp anymore. It felt heavy. Like carrying a backpack you forgot you were wearing. I realized that I was surviving my days, not living them. I was present physically, but absent socially. And language was the missing piece. So I made a small experiment. Not a big goal. Not, I will speak English confidently. Just one simple rule, one real English moment per day. It didn't matter how short. It didn't matter how broken. It just had to be real. The first moment was awkward. Painfully awkward. I asked a very simple question, something I could have easily avoided. My grammar wasn't perfect. My pronunciation wasn't clear. But the other person didn't laugh. They didn't correct me. They answered. And something inside my body relaxed. That's not emotional poetry. That's biology. When a social interaction ends safely, the brain releases signals that reduce fear. Slowly, the threat level goes down. Science calls this exposure therapy. You don't remove fear by thinking about it. You remove fear by meeting it in small, controlled doses. And that's exactly what those 2 weeks became. Gentle exposure to English in real life. By the second week, I noticed another change. My inner voice softened. Instead of saying, "Your English is bad," it started saying, "It's okay to be slow." That may sound small, but self-talk shapes behavior. Studies show that compassionate self-talk improves learning and memory retention. When you stop attacking yourself, your brain becomes more open to input. I also started using English differently. Not to impress. Not to perform. But to connect. Very simple phrases. Very human purposes. Asking how someone's day was. Saying thank you with eye contact. Making small comments about the weather. These moments didn't make me fluent, but they made me visible. And being seen is the opposite of loneliness. 2 weeks didn't change my English level dramatically, but they changed my relationship with English. I stopped seeing it as a wall and started seeing it as a bridge, a shaky bridge, yes, but still a bridge. And every time I stepped on it, even carefully, I proved something to myself. I can move forward without being perfect. If you are learning English and feeling stuck, maybe the problem isn't your ability. Maybe it's your fear system working overtime. You don't need more pressure. You need safer experiences, slower speech, smaller steps, real moments. Because sometimes, 2 weeks don't change your life from the outside. They change it from the inside. And that internal shift, that quiet confidence, is where real progress begins. Climate shock. Have you ever felt your mood change before you even understood why? One moment you feel calm, the next moment you feel tired, quiet, and strangely distant from yourself. During my 2 weeks in America, I learned that sometimes the reason is not emotional at all. Sometimes it's the climate, the weather, the air, the way your body reacts before your mind has time to explain anything. Climate shock is real, but people rarely talk about it when they talk about learning English. We talk about grammar. We talk about vocabulary. We talk about confidence. But we forget that the body is the first student in any new country. Before you learn the language, your body has to learn how to survive the environment. In the US, especially depending on the region, the weather can change quickly and aggressively. Cold mornings, bright sunny afternoons, dry air, strong wind. For someone who grew up in a more stable climate, this feels like a quiet attack on the nervous system. You wake up already slightly uncomfortable. Your skin feels dry. Your throat feels tight. Your breathing feels different. And when your body is uncomfortable, your brain becomes less flexible. Science explains this clearly. The human brain works best when the body feels safe and regulated. Sudden temperature changes, low humidity, or lack of sunlight can increase cortisol, the stress hormone. High cortisol reduces working memory. And working memory is exactly what you need to listen, understand, and speak a foreign language. So when you feel like your English suddenly became worse in America, it may not be because you forgot English. It may be because your nervous system is busy dealing with climate stress. I remember one morning very clearly. I stepped outside, and the cold air hit my face hard. My shoulders went up. My jaw tightened. I didn't notice it consciously, but my body did. Later that day, when someone spoke to me in English, my reaction was slow. My answers were short. My voice was quiet. Not because I didn't want to talk, but because my body was already in protection mode. This is important. When the body feels threatened, even slightly, the brain prioritizes survival over communication. Language becomes optional. Silence becomes attractive. This is why many immigrants and language learners become quieter. In colder, harsher climates. It's not personality. It's biology. Climate also affects social behavior. In many parts of America, people spend more time indoors. Cars replace walking. Doors close quickly. At home, you might chat with neighbors, hear voices, feel human noise. In some American neighborhoods, everything is quiet. Too quiet. That silence can feel peaceful at first. Then it starts to feel empty. Loneliness grows faster in silence. And here's the connection to English learning. Fewer casual interactions mean fewer natural chances to practice. In warmer cultures, language flows outside, at markets, on the street, in small talk. In colder or more private environments, language becomes scheduled, intentional, and that puts pressure on you. Every conversation feels important. Every mistake feels heavier. I noticed this pattern in myself. On colder days, I spoke less English. On warmer days, when the sun stayed longer, I felt lighter. I smiled more. I spoke more. This is not a coincidence. Research shows that sunlight increases serotonin, which improves mood and cognitive flexibility. When your brain is more flexible, it handles foreign sounds better. You understand more. You respond faster. So instead of blaming myself, I started observing myself. I stopped saying, "Why am I so bad at English today?" and started asking, "How does my body feel today?" This shift changed everything. On days when the weather was harsh, I allowed myself to slow down. I used simpler English, shorter sentences. I spoke less, but I listened more. And that was still progress. I also made small adjustments. I drank more water, because dry air affects the throat and voice. I took short walks when the sun was out. I breathed more consciously before speaking. These are not language tricks. These are nervous system tricks. But they directly improve your ability to speak English. Many people quit learning English not because it's too hard, but because they think something is wrong with them. They don't realize how deeply environment affects performance. Climate shock can make you feel unmotivated, disconnected, even depressed. And when that happens, language is the first thing to suffer. If you are in a new country and suddenly feel tired of English, be gentle with yourself. Ask better questions. Not "Why am I failing?" but "What is my body adjusting to right now?" Learning a language is not just mental work. It's full body adaptation. By the end of those 2 weeks, I didn't control the weather, but I understood its influence. I stopped fighting myself on hard days. I respected my limits. And strangely, when I stopped forcing English, English came back more naturally. Climate shock taught me something important. progress doesn't always look loud. Sometimes, progress is simply staying kind to yourself while your body learns a new world. And once your body feels safer, your voice slowly returns. Culture is quiet pressure. Have you ever felt pressure without anyone actually pressing you? No one says anything wrong. No one criticizes you. No one raises their voice. And yet, you feel tense, careful, and slightly smaller than usual. During my time in America, I realized that culture can create pressure without sound. It doesn't shout. It whispers. And if you are not aware of it, that whisper slowly changes how you speak, how you move, and how you see yourself. American culture values independence, efficiency, and personal space. These are not bad things. In fact, they are strengths. But for someone coming from a more relational culture, where connection is built through closeness and shared presence, this difference can feel cold. Not unfriendly. Just distant. And distance, over time, can feel like rejection, even when it's not. In many daily interactions, Americans are polite but brief. How are you? Does not always mean tell me how you feel. It often means hello. Smiles are quick. Conversations end cleanly. People respect time. And if you are not used to this rhythm, your brain starts overthinking. Did I say something wrong? Did I talk too much? Did I sound strange? Psychology calls this cultural mismatch stress. When your natural communication style doesn't match the dominant culture, your brain works harder to monitor itself. You become hyper-aware of your words, your tone, your pauses. This self-monitoring uses cognitive energy, the same energy you need to process English. So while you are busy checking yourself, your listening suffers. Your speaking slows down. Not because your English is weak, but because your brain is multitasking under pressure. I noticed this most clearly in small talk. In theory, small talk should be easy. Simple topics. Short sentences. But in reality, it felt like walking on thin ice. I wasn't sure how much to share. In my culture, talking a little longer builds warmth. Here, talking too long can feel intrusive. So I shortened my answers. I simplified my personality. I became quieter. And the quiet didn't come from lack of ideas. It came from fear of crossing invisible lines. There is also the cultural relationship with mistakes. In many immigrant communities, making mistakes in language feels shameful. You don't want to bother others. You don't want to slow them down. And in a culture that values efficiency, that fear grows stronger. You start thinking, I should only speak when I'm sure. But waiting for certainty is a trap. Language lives in uncertainty. Neuroscience shows that when we fear social evaluation, the brain activates the anterior cingulate cortex, the area related to social pain. Social pain is processed. Similarly to physical pain. That's why embarrassment can hurt. Literally. And when your brain expects that pain, it tries to avoid it. Silence becomes protection. This is why cultural pressure can reduce language practice even more than grammar difficulty. Grammar errors can be corrected. Cultural anxiety is harder to see. What helped me was changing my interpretation. Instead of seeing short interactions as rejection, I started seeing them as cultural efficiency. Instead of thinking, they don't care, I thought, this is how respect looks here. This mental reframing reduced stress. And when stress went down, my English came out more naturally. I also gave myself permission to be a little different. I spoke slightly slower than the average pace. I asked for clarification when needed. I allowed small pauses. And something interesting happened. Most people adjusted. They slowed down. They repeated. Not because they felt sorry for me, but because communication is a two-way process. This taught me an important lesson. You don't have to perfectly fit the culture to belong in it. You just need to participate honestly. Culture is flexible when you are human. For English learners, this matters deeply. If you feel pressure to sound native, you carry unnecessary weight. Your goal is not perfection. Your goal is connection. And connection happens when you are present, not when you are flawless. American culture may feel quiet on the surface, but it still values authenticity. When you show effort, when you show respect, when you show real intention to communicate, that is usually enough. By the end of those 2 weeks, I still felt cultural differences. But they no longer felt like walls. They felt like background noise. Something I noticed, but didn't fear. And when fear fades, language has room to breathe. Culture, I learned, is not an enemy. It's an environment. Once you understand its rules, you stop fighting it. And when you stop fighting, you finally find your voice. English became fear. Have you ever noticed that fear doesn't always arrive loudly? Sometimes it slips in quietly, sits down next to you, and pretends to be logic. During my time in America, English slowly stopped being a tool for communication and started becoming something else. A test. A mirror. A reminder of what I thought I lacked. English didn't attack me. I let it become fear. At the beginning, I believed I was afraid of making mistakes. But that was only the surface. What I was really afraid of was the meaning I attached to those mistakes. If I mispronounced a word, it meant I wasn't smart enough. If I asked someone to repeat, it meant I didn't belong. If I spoke slowly, it meant I was behind. English became a language of judgment. Inside my head. Psychology calls this catastrophic thinking. One small error becomes proof of a big personal failure. The brain jumps from "I made a mistake" to "I am the mistake." And when language learning mixes with identity, fear grows quickly. You're no longer practicing English. You're protecting your self-image. I noticed this fear most clearly before speaking. Not during. Before. My mouth would stay closed even when I knew the words. My mind rehearsed sentences again and again, searching for perfection. But perfection never arrived. So neither did my voice. This is a classic response of the nervous system. When the brain senses risk, it delays action. It says, wait. Prepare more. But in language, overpreparation kills spontaneity. Neuroscience explains this with the concept of cognitive load. Your brain can only handle a limited amount of information at once. When you're thinking about grammar, pronunciation, vocabulary, cultural rules, and self-image at the same time, your system overloads. Speech shuts down. Silence feels safer. What made this worse was comparison. I heard other non-native speakers talking fluently. I saw immigrants joking in English. And instead of feeling inspired, I felt smaller. Social comparison activates the same brain regions as physical pain. And pain makes us withdraw. So instead of practicing more, I practiced less. There was one moment that made this very clear to me. Someone asked me a simple question. I understood it. I had an answer. But my brain froze, because I wasn't sure my answer sounded natural. In that pause, the opportunity passed. And afterward, I felt frustrated, not at English, but at myself. Fear does that. It doesn't just stop you from speaking. It makes you angry at your own silence. At some point, I had to be honest with myself. English didn't become fear on its own. I made it fear by attaching my worth to my performance. I believed that speaking good English made me valuable, and speaking bad English made me invisible. That belief was never true. But beliefs don't need evidence to feel real. So I started challenging that belief in a very practical way. I intentionally spoke when I felt unready. Not recklessly. Just gently. I allowed mistakes to happen in public. I let my accent be heard. I didn't apologize for my English before speaking. And every time I survived a bad moment, my fear weakened. This is supported by science. The brain updates fear through experience, not logic. Each time you speak and nothing terrible happens, your nervous system learns a new rule: this is safe. Fear loses its authority when it's not rewarded. I also changed my internal language. Instead of saying, "My English is terrible," I said, "My English is working." Because communication doesn't require beauty. It requires function. If the message arrives, the language succeeded. This simple reframe reduced pressure immediately. Slow English helped too. When I slowed down, I gave my brain time to breathe. I didn't chase native speed. I honored clarity. Studies show that slower speech increases accuracy and confidence for language learners. Speed comes later. Safety comes first. By the end of those 2 weeks, English was still imperfect. Still accented. Still limited. But it was no longer fear. It was effort. It was movement. And movement is the opposite of fear. If English feels scary to you, ask yourself one question. What story are you telling about your mistakes? Because mistakes are not evidence of failure. They are evidence of participation. English didn't become fear because it was difficult. It became fear because I forgot why I was learning it in the first place. To connect, not to prove. And when I remembered that, fear slowly loosened its grip, and my voice began to return. A small English moment. Sometimes, change doesn't come with noise or celebration. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as an ordinary moment that almost doesn't matter. No big decision. No deep conversation. Just a small English moment, the kind you usually forget by the end of the day. But this one stayed with me, because it changed how I saw myself. It happened on a normal afternoon. Nothing special about the day. I was tired, a little distracted, and not in the mood to talk. Those are usually the moments when English disappears for me. When energy is low, fear comes back easily. My brain likes to say, not today. Stay quiet. And most days, I listened. That day, I didn't. Someone asked me a simple question. The kind of question you hear every day in America. I understood it immediately. My answer was simple too. No complex grammar. No advanced vocabulary. But there was a pause. A familiar pause. The moment when my brain checked for danger. The moment when fear whispered, what if it sounds wrong? And then something new happened. I answered anyway. The sentence was slow. Slightly awkward. My accent was clear. But it was honest. And when I finished speaking, nothing bad happened. No judgment. No impatience. Just a normal response. The conversation continued for a few seconds, and then it ended naturally. That was it. That was the moment. From the outside, it looked like nothing. But inside, my nervous system registered something important. I spoke, and I survived. That's how fear changes. Not through motivation speeches, but through safe experiences. Neuroscience explains this through neuroplasticity. The brain changes based on what you do repeatedly. For a long time, my brain learned that silence meant safety. That speaking English meant risk. But this small moment introduced a new pattern. Speaking could also be safe. After that, I noticed a subtle shift. Not confidence. Not courage. Just less resistance. The next time I needed to speak, my body tensed a little less. My breath was a little deeper. My mind didn't rush as fast. That's progress. Even if it doesn't look impressive. What made this moment powerful was its simplicity. I didn't try to be impressive. I didn't try to sound native. I didn't prepare. I just responded. And that taught me something important. Fluency doesn't begin with complexity. It begins with permission. Many English learners wait for a big moment. A deep conversation. A perfect sentence. A breakthrough. But language growth usually happens in small, repeated moments. Ordering food. Answering a question. Making a short comment. These moments rewire the brain slowly. Psychology calls this self-efficacy, the belief that you can handle a situation. Self-efficacy grows from success, even small success. And once it grows, behavior changes naturally. You don't force yourself to speak. You feel more willing. After that day, I started noticing more small English moments. They were always there, but before, I ignored them. I focused on what I couldn't say, not what I could. Now, I collected them quietly. One sentence. One response. One short interaction. Each one added a little weight to my confidence. I also stopped judging the quality of my English during these moments. I didn't analyze my grammar afterward. I didn't replay the conversation in my head. I let it end. This was important. Overanalysis brings fear back. Acceptance lets learning continue. Slow English became my ally. I spoke at a pace that felt natural to me, not to the listener. I allowed pauses. I used simple words. And instead of feeling embarrassed, I felt present. Presence is more important than Polish. This small English moment also changed how I saw other people. I realized that most people are not listening to judge. They are listening to respond. They are busy with their own thoughts. This understanding reduced pressure even more. When you stop being the center of your own anxiety, communication becomes lighter. By the end of those 2 weeks, I didn't become fearless. Fear still showed up sometimes. But it no longer controlled me. I had evidence now. Real memory. Proof that speaking English didn't destroy me. It connected me. If you are learning English, don't wait for a perfect opportunity. Look for a small one. A moment that feels safe enough. Speak one sentence. Let it be imperfect. Let it pass. Because one small English moment can do what hours of silent studying cannot. It can teach your brain that you are capable. And once your brain believes that, the door to real communication begins to open. Love in broken English. Love does not ask for perfect grammar. It doesn't wait until your pronunciation improves. It doesn't care if your sentence is simple or broken. Love listens to intention. And during my time in America, I learned this lesson through a story that began not with confidence, but with very broken English. At first, I didn't even recognize it as love. It felt more like connection. A quiet understanding. Two people trying to meet each other in the middle of unfamiliar space. The words were simple. Sometimes incomplete. Sometimes wrong. But somehow, they carried more meaning than the polished sentences I practiced alone. I remember one conversation clearly. It was slow. We both paused often. I searched for words. She waited. Not impatient. Not correcting. Just listening. That kind of listening is rare. And powerful. In that space, my English didn't feel like a test. It felt like a bridge. A fragile bridge, but strong enough to hold. Honesty. Psychology tells us that emotional safety increases language output. When you feel accepted, your brain reduces fear responses. The amygdala, the part responsible for threat detection, calms down. And when that happens, language flows more naturally. That's exactly what I experienced. Around her, my English didn't disappear. It slowed down, but it stayed. Our conversations were not deep at first. Weather. Daily routines. Small observations. But slowly, emotion entered the space. A smile held a second longer. A question that wasn't necessary, but curious. Love doesn't rush. It unfolds in simple moments. There were many mistakes. I misused words. I mixed tenses. I pronounced things wrong. Sometimes I stopped mid-sentence, embarrassed. But instead of pulling away, she leaned in. That response changed everything. My brain learned a new association. Mistakes did not lead to rejection. They led to understanding. This is important for English learners. Many people believe they must be fluent before they are lovable, interesting, or worthy of connection. That belief is false. Love does not require fluency. It requires presence. Broken English can still carry kindness, humor, care, and vulnerability. In fact, broken English can be more honest. When vocabulary is limited, emotion becomes clearer. You choose words carefully. You listen more. You feel more. Communication becomes human again, not performative. I noticed something else. When emotion entered the conversation, I remembered English better. Words stuck. Phrases repeated. Naturally. This is supported by neuroscience. Emotional experiences strengthen memory formation. The brain remembers what matters. Love makes language matter. There were moments of misunderstanding. 2. Small conflicts caused by language gaps. But instead of creating distance, they created patience. We learned to clarify. To repeat. To ask gently. These skills are not taught in textbooks. They are learned in relationships. Love also changed my motivation. Before, I learned English to survive, to function, to avoid embarrassment. Now, I wanted to express, to share stories, to explain feelings. Motivation shifted from fear to desire. And desire is a stronger teacher. I began practicing English differently. Not by memorizing, but by living. I paid attention to how emotions were expressed. Tone, timing, silence. Love taught me that what you don't say can be as important as what you say. This story didn't turn into a perfect romance overnight. It stayed real, slow, sometimes uncertain, but it carried warmth. And in that warmth, my English felt less heavy, less sharp, more forgiving. By the end of those 2 weeks, I understood something deeply. Language is not just a skill. It's a space. A space where people meet. And love can exist in that space even when words are incomplete. If you are learning English and feel unlovable because of your level, let this story remind you, you don't need perfect sentences to be understood. You need courage to show up as you are. Broken English did not weaken my connection. It made it honest. And honesty is where love begins. Marriage across cultures. Marriage sounds simple when you say the word. 2 people. 1 life. Shared space. But when marriage crosses cultures, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a daily lesson in listening, not just to words, but to silence, habits, expectations, and the stories each person carries without realizing it. During my time in America, I understood that marriage across cultures is not about speaking better English. It's about hearing more clearly. Before this, I thought language was the main challenge. Vocabulary, pronunciation, speed. But marriage taught me that even perfect English cannot save a conversation if listening is missing. And broken English can still hold a relationship together if listening is present. In the beginning, misunderstandings appeared in small ways. Not dramatic arguments. Just confusion. Different assumptions about time, privacy, independence, family roles. In my culture, closeness often means care. Asking questions means concern. In American culture, space often means respect. Fewer questions mean trust. Neither is wrong. But when you don't recognize the difference, you can easily feel ignored or controlled. These moments tested my English in a new way. I wasn't just trying to communicate information. I was trying to communicate emotion, intention. An emotion is harder than facts. You can look up words, but you can't Google tone. Psychology explains this through high context and low context cultures. In high context cultures, meaning is often indirect. Shared understanding fills the gaps. In low-context cultures, meaning is more explicit. Words carry more responsibility. When these styles meet in marriage, confusion is natural. And confusion, if not handled carefully, becomes distance. At first, I tried to solve everything with more explanation. More words. Longer sentences. But that didn't help. Sometimes it made things worse. I learned that when emotions are high, language capacity drops. The brain shifts into defense mode. Listening shuts down. This is true in any language. So I did something unexpected. I spoke less. And listened more. Not passive listening. Active listening. Watching facial expressions. Noticing pauses. Feeling the energy behind words. When I didn't understand something, I asked slowly. Gently. Without urgency. This changed the tone completely. Conversations softened. Tension dropped. Marriage across cultures taught me that understanding does not come from winning an argument. It comes from curiosity. When you are curious, your brain stays open. When you are defensive, your brain closes. There were moments when my English failed me. When I couldn't express something important. Frustration came quickly. But instead of pushing harder, I learned to pause. Silence became a tool. Silence gave emotions time to settle. And when emotions settled, English returned. Science supports this. Emotional regulation improves cognitive performance. When the nervous system calms down, language centers function better. This is why calm conversations feel easier, even in a second language. I also learned that marriage gives language meaning. Certain words became important because they carried shared experience. Inside jokes. Repeated phrases. Familiar tones. These created a private language, not perfect English, but our English. This private language built safety. And safety changed everything. I didn't need to sound native. I needed to sound sincere. And sincerity doesn't depend on accent. Over time, I noticed something surprising. My listening skills improved faster than my speaking. I understood more than I could say. And that was okay. Listening is the foundation of intimacy. When you feel heard, words matter less. Marriage also changed how I learned English outside the relationship. I became more patient with myself. Less reactive to mistakes. I understood that communication is not about performance. It's about presence. By the end of those 2 weeks, I realized that marriage across cultures is like learning a language every day. You misunderstand. You adjust. You try again. Progress is not linear. But it is real. If you are learning English and worried about relationships, remember this. People don't connect because you speak perfectly. They connect because you listen deeply. Marriage taught me that English is not just something you speak. It's something you share. And when sharing becomes the goal, language stops being a barrier and starts becoming a bond. Family and children. Family changes the meaning of everything. Time feels different. Silence feels different. And language, especially English, stops being something you study and starts becoming something you live with. During my time in America, I realized that family and children did something no textbook ever could. They gave English a reason to stay. Before that, English often felt optional. Important, yes, but easy to postpone. With family, postponement disappears. Life moves forward whether you are ready or not. School forms arrive. Doctor appointments happen. Simple questions from children come without warning. And suddenly, English is not about confidence. It's about responsibility. Children don't care if your grammar is perfect. They care if you understand them. They care if you respond. And that pressure is different from fear. Fear freezes you. Responsibility moves you. I remember a small moment that stayed with me. A child asked a simple question in English. Not difficult, but unexpected. I had to answer immediately. No time to prepare. No time to translate in my head. I answered with the English I had. Simple. Direct. Maybe not perfect. But enough. And in that moment, I felt something shift. English wasn't judging me. It was trusting me. Psychology tells us that purpose-driven learning is stronger than fear-driven learning. When the brain learns for survival or connection, memory improves. Motivation becomes stable. Family created that purpose for me. English became part of caring. I also noticed how children learn language. They don't wait to be ready. They speak before they are correct. They repeat. They guess. They laugh at mistakes. And they improve quickly. Watching this reminded me how unnatural adult fear around language really is. We unlearn play. And then we wonder why learning feels heavy. Family life also exposed cultural differences more clearly. Parenting styles, expectations, communication patterns. In some cultures, family is deeply involved. In others, independence is taught early. Navigating these differences required patience and listening. A lot of listening. There were days when English felt exhausting. Long days. Too many decisions. Too many explanations. But even on those days, English didn't disappear. It showed up in small ways. Short instructions. Gentle reminders. Shared routines. Language embedded in life is easier to carry. Neuroscience explains this as contextual learning. When language is tied to real situations, the brain creates stronger neural connections. Words learned in context are remembered better. Family creates endless context. Children also changed how I listened. I slowed down. I paid attention to tone more than words. I simplified. Not because I was less capable, but because clarity matters more than complexity. This carried over into my English with adults. I became clearer, calmer, more effective. There was also vulnerability. Children notice everything. They hear accents. They ask questions. At first, that made me self-conscious. Then I realized something important. By seeing me try, they learned that effort matters more than perfection. My imperfect English became a lesson in courage. Family turned English into a shared journey. Not something I carried alone. Mistakes were normal. Confusion was part of the process. And laughter softened everything. By the end of those 2 weeks, I understood that family is not just support. It's structure. It forces consistency. And consistency is the real secret to language learning. If you are learning English and feel tired, find a reason bigger than fear. It doesn't have to be family, but it has to be real. A reason that pulls you forward even when motivation is low. For me, family and children made English human. It stopped being a subject. It became a tool for love, care and presence. And when language becomes part of love, it stops feeling lonely. Simple English healing. Have you ever noticed that the hardest thing about learning English is not the language itself, but the pressure you put on it? During my time in America, I discovered something unexpected. The thing that slowly healed my loneliness was not advanced vocabulary, not fluent conversations, not sounding natural. It was simple English, used every day, without drama. At first, I believed that simple English was a weakness. Something temporary. Something to hide. I thought real progress meant longer sentences, faster speech, fewer pauses. But loneliness doesn't care how advanced your grammar is. Loneliness responds to connection. And connection often begins with simplicity. When I allowed myself to use simple English, something changed in my body. My shoulders relaxed. My breathing slowed. I wasn't racing against my own thoughts anymore. I was present. And presence is powerful. Science supports this. When cognitive load decreases, emotional regulation improves. Simple language reduces mental effort. The brain feels safer. And when the brain feels safe, social engagement increases. In other words, simple English is not just easier, it's healing. I started noticing how often simple English already existed around me. How are you? Have a good day. Thank you. These phrases are small, but they carry warmth. Repeating them daily created rhythm. Rhythm created familiarity, and familiarity reduced loneliness. Loneliness thrives in silence. Simple English breaks silence gently. You don't need deep conversations every day. You need consistent human contact. Simple words make that possible. I also noticed something interesting. When I spoke simply, people responded more naturally. Conversations felt smoother. There was less pressure to perform. This is because clarity invites cooperation. When your message is clear, others help complete the interaction. Many English learners think healing comes after fluency. I learned the opposite. Healing comes before fluency. When you feel better emotionally, learning accelerates. When you feel lonely and judged, learning slows down. I also practice simple English with myself. My internal dialogue changed. Instead of criticizing, I encouraged. Instead of "I'm bad at English," I said, "I'm learning English." This may sound small, but internal language shapes behavior. Compassion improves persistence. Simple English also allowed me to reflect. I could describe my day, my feelings, my thoughts, even in basic sentences. Reflection creates meaning. Meaning reduces loneliness. You don't need poetic language to be honest. Neuroscience explains this through self-referential processing. When you talk about yourself, the brain activates networks related to identity and emotion. Using simple English to describe your inner world strengthens both language and emotional clarity. By the end of those 2 weeks, I realized that simple English was not a step backward. It was a foundation. A place to rest. A place to rebuild confidence. If you are learning English and feel lonely, try this. Speak less, but speak honestly. Use fewer words, but use them often. Let English be slow. Let it be kind. Healing doesn't require perfection. It requires permission. And sometimes, the simplest English is enough to remind you that you are not alone. You are not weak. Let me say this clearly, slowly, and directly. You are not weak, because learning English feels hard. You are not lazy. You are not stupid. And you are not broken. What you are experiencing is human. And more importantly, it is explainable. Many people who try to learn English believe their lack of progress means a lack of ability. But psychology and neuroscience tell a very different story. Most learners don't fail because they can't learn. They stop because their nervous system is overloaded. When you move to a new country, your brain is already working overtime. New sounds, new rules, new social signals, new expectations. Your brain treats all of this as potential threat, even if nothing bad is happening. This constant alert state drains mental energy. And language learning is one of the first things to suffer when energy is low. This is called cognitive fatigue. When cognitive fatigue builds up, motivation drops. Memory becomes less reliable. Focus disappears. You start forgetting words you know. This feels like regression. But it's not. It's exhaustion. Many learners interpret this exhaustion as failure. They tell themselves, "I should be better by now." That sentence alone creates pressure. And pressure activates fear. Fear shuts down learning. It's a vicious cycle. Another factor is emotional. Avoidance. Learning English forces you into situations where you may feel embarrassed, small, or exposed. Your brain remembers those feelings. And because the brain's main job is to protect you, it quietly pushes you away from those situations. You don't feel scared. You feel unmotivated. But lack of motivation is often disguised fear. This is why forcing yourself doesn't work long term. You can push for a while. But without safety, your brain resists. Sustainable learning requires emotional safety. There is also the myth of constant confidence. Social media shows people speaking fluently, smiling, progressing fast. You don't see their silent moments, their fear, their plateaus. Comparison creates unrealistic expectations. And unrealistic expectations create self-blame. Science shows that learning happens in waves, not lines. Plateaus are normal. They are periods of integration. Your brain is reorganizing. But because progress is invisible during plateaus, people quit. You are not weak for feeling stuck. You are processing. What helped me was changing the question. Instead of asking, "Why can't I do this?" I asked, "What support does my brain need right now?" Sometimes the answer was rest. Sometimes repetition. Sometimes emotional reassurance. Sometimes just slowing down. I also stopped treating English as a measure of my worth. Language is a skill, not a personality test. Your value doesn't increase with fluency. It already exists. Practical changes helped too. I reduced input. Fewer videos. More repetition. I spoke less, but more regularly. Consistency beats intensity. 10 minutes a day is better than 1 hour once a week. I also focused on comprehension before production. Listening without pressure. Letting sounds become familiar. This builds confidence naturally. Speaking grows from understanding, not force. If you are close to giving up, pause. Not forever. Just long enough to breathe. Ask yourself, am I tired, or am I incapable? Most of the time, the answer is tired. You don't need to quit. You need to adjust. You are not behind. You are learning in a complex environment with limited emotional support. That is hard. And doing hard things slowly does not make you weak. It makes you resilient. Before you judge yourself, remember this: your brain is not your enemy. It is trying to protect you. When you work with it instead of against it, progress returns. So if English feels heavy right now, don't add more weight. Add kindness. Add patience. Add safety. Because strength in language learning is not about pushing harder. It's about staying longer. And you are still here. A hopeful ending. There is a quiet moment that comes after struggle, when nothing outside has changed much, but something inside finally settles. That was how the last days of those 2 weeks in America felt for me. The city was the same. The language was still imperfect. The climate, the culture, the pace of life, all unchanged. But I was no longer lonely in the same way. Not because I had mastered English, but because I had stopped fighting myself. I realized that the question was never really, am I lonely in America? The deeper question was, am I alone inside? Even when I'm with myself. At the beginning of this journey, English felt like a wall. Tall, cold, and silent. Every mistake felt like proof that I didn't belong. Every pause felt like failure. But slowly, piece by piece, that wall changed shape. It didn't disappear. It turned into a path. Uneven. Slow. But walkable. Hope didn't arrive as confidence. It arrived as acceptance. Acceptance that learning a language is not a race. Acceptance that being slow does not mean being lost. Acceptance that connection does not require perfection. By the end of those 2 weeks, I was still speaking simple English. Still pausing. Still searching for words. But I was speaking. I was listening. I was responding. And most importantly, I was present. Presence changed everything. Psychology tells us that hope is not optimism. Hope is agency, the belief that your actions matter, even if the outcome is uncertain. That belief returned quietly. I no longer needed English to prove my worth. I needed it to share my life. I began noticing small signs of belonging. A familiar greeting. A repeated routine. A shared smile. These moments didn't remove all loneliness, but they softened it. Loneliness stopped being an enemy. It became a signal, a reminder that I value connection. And that's when I understood the real ending of this story. The happy ending was not fluency. It was peace. Peace with my accent. Peace with my pace. Peace with the fact that I am still learning. Many people wait for the end of the journey to feel okay. They say, when my English is good enough, I will be confident. When I stop making mistakes, I will belong. But that day may never come if confidence is always postponed. Belonging begins when you allow yourself to exist fully. Exactly where you are. If you are watching this video and feeling lonely, tired, or discouraged, let me tell you something important. You don't need to fix yourself before you deserve connection. You don't need perfect English to be understood. You don't need to sound like someone else to matter. Your story is still unfolding. English is not the judge of your life. It is just one of the tools you use to live it. When you learn English through stories, through real emotions, real struggles, real relationships, the language becomes lighter. It stops being a burden. It becomes a companion. And maybe that is the most hopeful ending of all. Not that everything becomes easy, but that you no longer walk alone inside yourself. So if you feel lonely in America, or anywhere else in the world, remember this: loneliness does not mean you failed. It means you are human. And humans are built to connect, slowly, imperfectly, but deeply. Stay with the language. Stay with yourself. Keep walking. Because this story doesn't end here. It continues every time you choose to speak, to listen, and to try again. Sometimes, the hardest part of living in America is not the language, not the weather, not even the culture. It's the quiet moment at night when everything finally slows down, and you realize the real question was never, is my English good enough? It was always, am I brave enough to keep going, even when I feel alone inside? If this story sounds familiar, then this video is not just something you watched, it's something you felt. And that feeling means you are not broken. You are learning. You are adjusting. You are becoming someone stronger than yesterday. This channel is not about perfect English. It's about real English, spoken slowly, honestly, through real stories, about climate, culture, love, marriage, family, and the quiet struggles nobody talks about. Every video here is designed to help you listen better, read deeper, speak more naturally, and most importantly, not feel alone while learning English. If you're tired of forcing yourself, if you want to learn English without pressure, without shame, if you believe stories can heal more than textbooks, subscribe to this channel now. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story, because the next video may talk about your life, your feelings, your English journey. And remember this: you don't need to be fluent to belong. You just need to stay. See you in the next story.